thank you so much for being here on the Scrunch Creator Economy Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I am so excited because I am a longtime stalker of yours and a subscriber of your email newsletter. So when
Oh my God, you're gonna make me blush.
I know. It's so good. I was like, oh my God, we get to talk to her on the podcast. So I'm so excited to share your story because firstly, it's super inspirational, and you have a thriving business, which I love in the creator space. But yeah, you're really doing things differently. So, and you provide so much amazing education and tools for both brands and creators. So just so excited to get stuck in. So why don't we just start by telling your story? How did you get here?
Well, it's quite a long story, but I'll try to be short and concise here. So I started out as a blogger back then. I wasn't considered an influencer because that term didn't exist. So that was a decade ago.
Wow.
Almost exactly a decade ago, I started out as a blogger, and I quickly monetized my blog actually and started working with brands pretty fast. And over time, obviously, my career kind of transitioned into social media with the rise of social media networks, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, years down the line, TikTok as well. So that's kind of like my influencer story in a nutshell. And then I launched my agency, Lex Digital Media, probably around 3 years ago at this point. So it's just because, I mean, there's different reasons for it, but one of the main ones is because I was working with brands already. And I noticed that brands, like while they like working with influencers, they might not necessarily know how to manage their own social media networks. So we started this service where we help brands manage their social media accounts, and we started getting personalities as well who wanted help in that department. And a couple of years ago, I dove like really deep into influencer coaching as well. I've been doing one-off coaching over the years, of course, but I developed the entire program that we just put on the app. It's called Influencer Accelerator. So this is basically a continuation of my Influencer Accelerator coaching that we launched a couple of years ago. So that's where we are right now. So we still service businesses, we service influencers, and we have a lot of cool, amazing products and tools for them. We literally help them how to do every single aspect of their business, how to manage it properly, how to manage their time, how to communicate with brands, how to negotiate with brands, and how to basically be effective business people.
I love this so much because I feel like when you think about creators and influencer marketing, there's so much focus on the brand. There's so much focus on the brand, reaching out to influencers, asking for the right deal, like all of those kind of things. But not a lot of people actually focus on the influencer or the creator and actually how to help them run a business, because they are businesses of themselves. So it's so important that they learn these skills. So how are you seeing that change? I mean, you've seen it all, going from blogger to influencer to now servicing influencers. How have you seen the landscape change over the last decade?
Well, I mean, obviously a lot. There's a lot more opportunity right now. When I started out, it was like just direct brand deals. Right now there's so many ways to work with brands, so many ways to monetize as an influencer, and so many ways to use influencers as business as well. So there's no kind of like one solution fits all. And this is kind of like actually the most common mistake I see from businesses when they do influencer marketing, for example. A lot of them, they don't set their goals correctly. So once they try influencer marketing, they're like, okay, we didn't achieve our goals, right? So it was not successful. But the definition of success of an influencer marketing campaign is very different for every single brand, depending on what stage of business they're in. So right now I see like a lot more diversity, a lot more inclusivity, a lot more possibility. I mean, we're talking about people can now monetize by working with brands and have 0 followers. Literally, they can just create content for brands and they don't have to post it on their own social media accounts. Like that never existed when I started out. So this is a very big change.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like I think about, again, we've been in the space for a little while, and yeah, it was so much like focused on sponsored posts. And I love how obviously we're seeing influencers who've kind of been around for a while, monetize in new and different ways. But it's almost like if you want to be an influencer today and just get started, there's still actually opportunity out there.
Oh, a ton. And I think there's a lot of tools right now that are available. For example, for me, whatever I put in my coaching program, that took me years to come up with myself, right? So right now, people have access to coaching tools like mine or others. There's a lot of free material out there. Like when I was working with brands years and years ago, and I was like Googling any sort of question that I would have, in regards to working with brands, there would simply be no answer
Yeah.
because the industry was just like emerging, right? So there was definitely not a lot of information. So right now, if you really want to dive into becoming an influencer, it's much easier. It's almost a little overwhelming with the amount of information, but once you sort through the information and understand how it works, I think it's much easier to monetize now than years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any tips? So for an influencer or creator who is like, okay, I've built up a little following and I haven't monetized yet and I really want to get started. Do you have any tips for them kind of when they're first starting to reach out to brands?
Well, absolutely. I think the most important part is to identify the personal brand. And a lot of influencers, they think it's their niche, but the personal brand is a little bit beyond the niche, right? It's all about like people right now with the rise of the video content, people relate with people and personalities more than just aesthetic pictures, right? And so when I talk about personal brand, it's what you stand for, it's your values, it's your persona, your demeanor, your behavior. And basically people relate with you, on a much deeper level, just because, they watch you for reasons that they associate with you or they aspire to be you, right? So once you identify the personal brand, and we can actually break it down into little subcategories very easily and develop the personal brand for influencers within my program. So once we identify that, that's kind of not only helping the influencer become very clear on what type of value they provide to the brand, and therefore direct the pitching process much more professionally, but also it's much easier for them to post content as well. So now they know exactly what they're going to be posting about on social media, how they're going to position themselves on social media, and so forth. And of course, pitching email templates. This is what we provide as well in the coaching, but also more importantly, we teach them how to customize them, because no brand outreach is ever the same. All brand connections are very different, and you will not necessarily land a paid brand deal right away. It's all about building relationships with brands, showcasing your value to the brands, and eventually closing down deals.
I love this so much. So I'm actually a salesperson by trade. Like that's my, corporate career. And
so that's up your alley for sure.
Totally. Yeah. But it's so funny because I feel like there's, a lot of influencers and creators who kind of think, if all I do is just post amazing content and build my followers, I'll land those brand deals. But I actually think, everything you just said, it's about actually building a relationship with a brand. You've got to get visible to the brand, like they might not even see you if all you're doing is focusing on your content and followers. So I love that you actually teach people almost a sales process. So how to build a relationship, reach out to the right people, and then not expect it to come off on day one, but, over time, close those bigger deals.
Exactly. And we provide all the tools to make it as simple for them as possible, but they still need to do the work.
Yes.
So yeah. And that's an interesting conversation I have with a lot of prospects that are not necessarily part of my coaching program. They are excited to become influencers. And then I kind of break down to them what the influencer career and journey entails. And they're like, you know what, maybe I don't want to be an influencer anymore.
Maybe this sounds like a lot of hard work.
Exactly. But if you really like what you do, it's all about creating content and building relationships. And there's always a system. Just like in every business, there's a system that you can build for yourself that works for you. No influencer business is the same. Every single influencer monetizes in different ways. So as long as you enjoy what you're doing, I think it's easy to become successful nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love as well, one big mistake that I see influencers make is kind of reaching out to a brand in their DMs and just, want to collab. So I love that you're like, no, you actually got to, explain your value, build a relationship, and take time to actually work with. I feel like some people forget that there's a human on the other side of the
Oh
brand who
yeah.
you're reaching out to.
Exactly. And also that human might not necessarily be the human that makes a decision in regards to influencer marketing, because obviously that came also from my experience because we managed business accounts for brands.
Yeah.
So when we manage the accounts, we manage those messages in bulk. So obviously a lot of influencers, while they can be added potentially to a list of influencers, they might not necessarily land that paid brand deal that they were looking for. So obviously as an influencer, I teach people in my community to be very professional, and email communication is still number one
Yes.
in terms of being professional. And we actually go over everything, the timing of the email, the rules of
Mm.
following up, because that's important as well. As you
Yeah.
know from sales, you need to follow up with your prospects. So all of this is covered very much in depth, sorry,
Yeah.
in my Influencer Accelerator app.
That's so awesome. I love that so much. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about creators and brand deals. Are you
Yeah.
seeing any other opportunities outside of brand deals for influencers or creators to make money these days?
Oh, absolutely. Well, obviously, we touched upon creating content, but not necessarily working with brands. But
Mhm.
beyond that, there's a lot more influencers that come up with their own products, whether
Mm.
it's digital product or a physical product. Back when I was kind of like in the height of my influencer career before I launched my agency. I mean, I'm still a working influencer and I work with a lot of brands right now. A lot of them I truly enjoy working with, but obviously I juggle a lot of hats.
Mm.
So when I was actually doing it only full time as an influencer, it took me a little bit to I noticed that a lot of influencers that had a big following, they were launching brands or they were launching their own
Mm.
products, but only those who had a big following. Whereas
Yeah.
right now, people don't have to have a huge following in order to monetize. And sometimes it's actually easier to monetize through your own products with a small following as well, because smaller following is niche following. And it's also
Mm.
beneficial for brand deals, and it's equally beneficial for sales if you want to sell something to your audience, because they're going to be very much into the specific niche that you are covering. So this is kind of like one of the ways to venture out as an influencer. All sorts of products, digital products, physical products, whatever your heart desires and whatever you feel inspired to be promoting regularly.
Mm.
Influencers can definitely jump on that train. And of course, in addition, there could be various different services as part of
Mm.
your influencer career, right? Like, for example, I launched an agency out of my services, right? I launched Lex Digital Media and we started helping out businesses, but it doesn't have to be a gigantic agency like I did. Influencers can just work on a consulting basis with brands, consult brands on their experience working as an influencer and on, the whole industry in general. Of course, they need to understand how this works. So this is the
Yes.
most important part. So that's why it's extremely important for influencers to be educated on every level of influencer marketing, because that way they can monetize their skills in so many different ways.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love that you touched on that you don't have to have a really, really large following to be able to
Oh
do
yeah.
that. And that's interesting because I've seen influencers that have, multi-millions of followers who actually really struggle to monetize because their audience is so broad and so general.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the small influencers, I feel like your engagement's a lot higher as well in the early days when you've just got sort of a small number of followers. Like people are really loyal and excited, and it's a lot easier for influencers to reply to every comment and, get
Oh yeah.
really engaged, when they're a little bit smaller.
Yes, it's 100% true. It's so funny because a lot of my people in my community, influencers, they can get better brand deals than myself because they have a more niche following.
Mm.
Obviously, I have a different level of brand deal that I will be securing as an influencer, because every size of influencer will be working with different kind of deliverables and different goals. because obviously my goal as an influencer with a big following is to deliver awareness, right? So it's going to be really hard for me to drive specific sales of a specific product unless it's very directly related to my niche, right? So whereas niche smaller influencers, micro influencers, they can actually convert into sales much easier, and they're not going to deliver as much awareness of the brand because obviously they don't have that many followers, but they will drive conversions better than a bigger influencer. So if a brand, for example, is executing an influencer campaign, I would suggest for them to work with both sizes, bigger influencers and smaller influencers, because these are very different goals that they're achieving while working with these types of influencers.
Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting. I think sometimes brands think if they just find the one perfect influencer, their whole life will change. So I love that you touched on micro influencers and then the bigger influencers and kind of using a combination of both. Because I feel like experimentation in influencer marketing is so important. What do you think about
100%.
working with different niches, different sizes, and how to kind of scale a campaign over time?
100% true. It's pretty much as any marketing in general, right? So it's all about calibrating. You can't like execute a perfect marketing campaign from the get-go. You need to figure out what works for your business and what are your goals, obviously. So the same thing goes with influencer marketing. You gotta test out different niches, different types of influencers. And of course, you gotta understand that one influencer is not gonna sell out your entire store, even if it's the most famous influencer.
Even if it's Kim Kardashian.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way in 2022, 2023, and moving forward.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I love that good, solid marketing foundation approach. It's, get back to basics and understanding who your customer is and experimenting. That's super cool. So you said 2023. So tell me, what do you think is coming next for influencer marketing? Like, what trends are you starting to see? What's sort of changed over time?
Well, TikTok obviously took over the entire market. There's a lot less aesthetics that brands are going to be looking for. They're going to be moving more into casual content. Video content is, of course, already a trend. I don't see a decline in that. I think it's only going to be an increase in that. However, this is kind of like one of the main tips that I always give to influencers who are tuning in to listen to me, who are watching my lessons. I'm not saying you should switch right away. For example, if an influencer never did video, so they were only creating pictures, now all of a sudden they start freaking out. They're like, oh my God, brands are not going to be working with me anymore. First of all, it takes time for the entire industry to transition. That's number one. And number two is that does not mean that pictures don't exist anymore. They still do. So it's just a matter of understanding how to sell yourself. And as long as you basically move with the trends and with the market and start introducing that content slowly, and obviously start monetizing the content slowly, you'll be able to sustainably monetize as an influencer in the long run. That's basically one of the tips that I actually give to obviously my entire coaching community. But more importantly, this is the rule that I had to follow over the years as an influencer. And that's why I was able to create consistent income for years and years, for a decade now as an influencer, just because I was kind of like observing the market. I was watching the trends. I was seeing where it's going. And then I was slowly adding that type of content and those type of trends into my own online presence. And of course, in general, I see a lot of diversification of channels as well. I don't think there's going to be just one platform anymore. Like back like even a couple of years ago, it was all about Instagram, right? So brands would not even care at that point, about other social media networks. And now they're kind of like dabbling into TikTok as well. I think it's going to be a lot of cross promotion, right? So if you have your presence on different social media networks, you're likely to secure more brand deals and provide more value to brands. And I think brands are going to be looking for something like that as well.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I was having a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago about blog content and long form content. And I'm like, I feel like everyone got obsessed with Instagram, but there's so much value in blog content, and bloggers still, even though we think bloggers is such an old term,
Oh,
actually,
100%. Yeah.
tapping into them as a part of your marketing strategy is like still so important.
100%. And it's long-term plays as well, because blogs take a while until they not only they reach their own audiences, but then they start trending on search engines, right? So you can actually, even I myself have some of the blog posts that are getting traffic that are like from years ago, just because they were calibrated by keywords and stuff like that. So it's kind of the same with long form YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So it takes a while for them to start trending. So I think this is a very important aspect of marketing as well. And you're 100% correct that bloggers are still very much relevant and they still monetize.
That's so good. I love it. It's a really good point around diversification. So I think both for brands and their marketing strategies, really testing out different channels and not kind of getting that shiny object syndrome of just Instagram.
Yeah.
And then even from an influencer, creator, blogger, whatever we want to call them side, actually them experimenting with different channels as well. And I always say to influencers, you've got to have your own website. You've got to have your own home base.
Oh, yeah.
So, if Instagram shuts down tomorrow, you've still got somewhere where you're capturing your email list and traffic as well, so people know where to find you.
100%. And also, not every influencer is going to be made for, let's say, TikTok. And that's okay. You can still monetize other platforms. So that's kind of like the biggest issue and fear I see from influencers. They're like, oh my God, now YouTube Shorts, you just told us about TikTok, now we have to be on YouTube Shorts. And I'm like, you don't have to be everywhere. You can try it out for sure. And I do recommend trying out your presence on every network to see which one resonates with you the most. But you don't have to have presence on every single network. You do have to have presence on a few of them, but not all of them, because you can't keep like you said, kind of like trying to, reach that shiny object, because you're never going to get there and you're just going to exhaust yourself. So it's all about pacing yourself, trying new things, and understanding that you can't be everywhere, but you will still be able to monetize regardless of where you are.
Yeah, that is such amazing advice. I love it. So what do you see the challenges in the industry? Where do you see people kind of getting unstuck when it comes to their influencer marketing?
Getting stuck or unstuck?
Or getting stuck. And so what kind of,
Yeah.
so then challenges and how do they overcome them?
So from a business perspective, I would say it's not defining their goals correctly, and kind of like not understanding how the influencer marketing works, not calibrating the influencers, not doing enough testing. I see a lot of businesses who tried, I don't know, sending products to 3 influencers. They didn't get any sales. And they're like, okay, influencer marketing doesn't work. And I'm like, that's not exactly how it works,
Yeah.
So kind of like understanding what goes behind influencer marketing, I think, is the biggest hurdle, the biggest struggle for businesses. And that's where companies like mine come in. We do consulting, we kind of break down the entire strategy, and we obviously customize the strategy for them. And again, the first strategy might not work, and that's totally fine, because it's all about, like I mentioned earlier, calibrating. So this is kind of like the biggest hurdle. And the way to get unstuck is obviously to either find professionals like myself or educate yourself. There's a lot of information right now that is available. I know it might be overwhelming, and that's actually like another thing too. You might find like so many different opinions, right? Everybody's an expert and everybody has like a different opinion. So I would suggest to kind of like, it's kind of like you process the news. You listen to everything, but then you kind of like interpret it your own way. So it's
I love that. That's a good analogy.
So it's kind of like the same way here with all sorts of like influencer marketing and the business side of it. I would recommend to kind of like listen to all sorts of opinions and form your own, but more importantly, practice. So that's kind of like my biggest advice. And it goes the same for influencers, right? It is much easier right now to find somebody who has walked that path and simply either follow their advice for free or just start working with them on a more deeper level. Regardless of what it is, there's a lot of free information out there. You just need to find people who you really trust, who have a good track record, obviously, as well, and just simply educate yourself. And like I mentioned, it doesn't have to be one coach. coach. It can be several different sources of information. You just process it and kind of like start testing it out. And again, it's all about testing. That's another issue that I see a lot of businesses and influencers are having. Like, for example, they understand how to monetize as an influencer, but they're not trying it. So they're like, okay, let me try to sell one product. They do like one story, they don't sell it. And then they're like, okay, so I can't introduce products because I can't sell them. And I'm like, that's again, not entirely how it works.
Yeah.
But it's all about testing, committing to whatever goal you set for yourself, seeing how it works. And as with anything in entrepreneurship and business, it's all about calibrating and analyzing, right? So it might not work 100%. That's totally fine. You just adjust the path and keep testing until you achieve success in your niche.
That is absolutely awesome. Well, Diana, thank you so much for joining us today on the Scrunch Creator Economy Show. Your wisdom and insights. Oh my gosh, anytime. You're welcome back anytime. But your wisdom and insights for both brands and creators is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and have a beautiful day.